Welcome to my quilted fabric tutorial. I'm going to show you how I choose to quilt fabric when I'm making a garment. So you can see I'm using my Mayfield jacket sleeve here, and I've lined up the grain line with that of the fabric as I normally would when I'm cutting out. And I'm just going to mark with some chalk here, a couple of centimetres away from all the outside lines, just because when I quilt the fabric up it may well shrink up a little bit, so it means I'll still have plenty of fabric to cut out my final sleeve. So chalk line, just marking roughly all the way around. Take that away, and then I'm just going to cut out this shape. You could further block cut and cut out just a big rectangle or something if you wanted to, but I'm doing this roughly in the shape of the sleeve, so it's slightly less wasteful. There we go, so very roughly cut out. So that was my top layer. It's a sort of a cotton linen mix that I've used for that, and this is just a cotton poplin that I've got for my bottom layer. So again, I'm lining up the grain roughly, and I'm going to mark around it with some chalk before I cut it out. I've used two sort of cotton or linen natural fibre based fabrics because it's going to be worn as a garment. My personal preference is that it's a bit more breathable if it's a natural fibre, but you can use a lining fabric if you wanted to for the inside. It doesn't have to be cotton. It's sometimes easier to get on and off, isn't it, if it's a bit slippery. So that's going to be my underneath fabric. This is my top again. Just make sure that the top one fits on the bottom one. Yeah, that's great. So now we're going to add the wadding layer. This is my wadding or batting. This is a cotton one, which is quite light and super snuggly. And again, I'm using all natural fibres because that's my preference. This one is a polyester version, which is definitely more pocket friendly, but perhaps not so comfortable to wear. It's worth also noting that using the cotton batting, obviously I've got all natural fibres here now, so when it comes to laundering and washing, it should be a bit more straightforward because they should all need the same washing instructions. So just beware if you're using a polyester that you may only be able to wash on a very cool wash, whereas cottons and linens can take a higher temperature. So I've laid it out. Batting doesn't have a grain line, so you can just lay it however you choose. Obviously trying to be economical, and just cut round the shape again. There we are, there's my wadding. So now we're going to mark out the lines we're going to use for quilting. So you want to choose what design you want to use for yours. I've got several markers here. This is a water soluble marker. This is a chalk pencil, well, a wheel, I suppose. It's got a little wheel in it at the bottom to mark lines in. That's quite a nice one. That's a clover one. There are other brands available. That's just happens to be the one that I've got. Or just a really soft pencil actually can work really well. They're all great options that wash out reliably. I'm going to use this chalk wheel today. So I've got a quilter's ruler here, and I am just going to mark on my straight grain to start with. That shows up quite nicely, that chalk, and as you can see, it's quite a fine line as well, so it is pretty useful for this. So I'm putting away my quilting ruler just for the second, because I've got on my pattern master, I've got some angles here. I've got a 45-degree angle that I'm just going to use. So I'm going 45 degrees against the grain, and I'm just going to trace some chalk lines now every 4 centimetres. The other useful thing about a quilting ruler or this pattern master is that they've got these little lines on that are all a ½ centimetre apart. You can get metric and imperial ones, and I'm going to use 4 centimetres, I think, But again, it's entirely up to you what design you choose. I think rectangles, squares and stripes are probably your easiest options, certainly for starting off, for doing a first foray into this. So I'm just going to mark some straight lines, all 4 centimetres apart, and I'm just working my way methodically across the fabric. As you can see, my ruler's not quite long enough to get all the way across, all the way down, so I'll just go back and line my ruler up with those lines and finish them off. There we go. So that's one set of lines done. Now you want to establish where you want the other ones to go. I think I'm going to do some diamonds. So again, I'm lining this up. I'm using my straight grain as a straight line, and I'm just going to put one line across to start with, all the way across, and again just moving 4 centimetres up each time and drawing the next line. So you can see you've got these kind of lozenge shapes coming out now. But there's nothing wrong with doing just stripes or squares. Anything looks great, as you'll see when we finished on the other side, on the pattern side. It will just look quilted at the end of the day. You won't necessarily see the design too clearly, but it will show up on this side. So now we're going to pin all these layers together. So I've got my printed fabric, that's right side down on the table, so the wrong side up. Then I've got my wadding or my batting, which is going on top of that. And then I've got my plain fabric, which has got my quilting lines marked on it on top. So smooth those out as much as you can so that they're all as smooth as possible. And then you can see I'm going to pin now, starting from the centre, working my way out to the edges. I'm pinning in between those lines that run horizontally on your screen, that run sort of from the sleeve head to the cuff, and I'm going to work out from the centre and out from the centre all the way, just smoothing as I go to make sure there's no wrinkles or puckers. There we go, we're all pinned and ready to stitch. We're going to start from the cuff and work up to the sleeve head, so just start from the same end each time. Okay, so now we're going to sew. I'm using a 36 thread, which is slightly thicker than normal, and I've got my stitch length set at about 4. You could use a walking foot if you have one. I don't have one, so I am just carefully guiding things through, or a rolling foot. You can adjust your feed sometimes just to make it not quite so pressured on the fabric, just to raise it up a little bit. All options to play around with. Because this batting isn't too thick, this works perfectly fine for me. So this is how I'm choosing to do it, just a slightly larger stitch length and gently guiding it through. You can remove the pins as you go. Okay, so now we're going to work across and do those other lines that cross over the vertical ones. Again, you can see my stitch length is a little bit larger than normal to account for the wadding and the layers of fabric. Just follow those lines. So now we've quilted our piece of fabric. You can always give it a press at this point if you want to. You can see all my lovely lines here. And on the other side, as I said, you can't really see them quite so much, but it has got that lovely sort of squashy texture, which is really lovely, nice and cosy. So I'm just going to place my pattern piece on top. It still fits, look, even though it's shrunk a little bit. Pin it on, cut out your pattern, and away you go. So please like or subscribe to our sewing channel, and do come and take a look at us over at sussexseamstress.com